welcome back. So I was just going through yesterday in my last video. I talked 163, underground science 163. I talked about this and how it looks like a Birkeland current kind of thing, and I've been thinking about it. It really still looks like that. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. But then I started looking around, so right now on this one through their videos specifically because they seem to be in a good location to find good fossils. I mean, so I watched Shale Fall. This is no, not that one. Shale Fall. There it is. This one. I took several pictures from here. Let's just go through the pictures I took from this video. So here I found this one really, really interesting because notably here's an ammonite, here's an ammonite, and then there's a grid within the shale around the ammonite as if they're unrelated. I think this kind of thing is written off by like, well, the fossil shell like tends to create this type of dynamic, but that's ridiculous. This type of dynamic tends to create the fossil shell. That's how it goes. So that these things are present really shed light onto that these really are almost like this. In this instance, it looks like a basalt column, like a hexagonal, like the Giant's Causeway kind of thing, but instead of it just having like a more like this kind of nature, it actually had so much of a current that it spiraled in a way that it fractionally differentiated crystallized material out so that it's not the same material and created a structure that then we call it a fossil. So this one really shows that like grid-like thing. I thought this one was interesting right here. Like, what? And then it's got notably layers the other way, like, and then this one over here, layers that way. And then if we look around, this is something that I would point out, like all of these little discs are like little ammonites that didn't quite form with the same definition, like here, all of these though, like this. There's a lot of these where there's no fossil, but it's because it just was a subtler amount of the same process going on where it wasn't quite defining structure, but it was still beginning to show like thin disc, basically a thin disc, creating these like coins. Like here. Like, is that an ammonite? It's an ammonite shape, but it really... So it must have been an ammonite, but what about this one? Like, this one's almost just like a rock that has like an indentation conveniently at an ammonite type of thing. Same for this one. Here. Like, it's... Are these ammonites? Because they have their features, but they don't have the shell, so we're just like disregarding them as like related. But it really is just the same thing on a different scale, notably like hexagonal-ish shape here. Regular shapes that tend to happen also. This one You can kind of see a circle right here. That's why I took this picture. I was like, I can see a circle right here. And then another one here that kind of comes off of it. Maybe another like side of one here. Hard to say after that. But these two, especially this one, are pretty detectable. And I was couple video, the floppy disk one is named that because I talk about that kind of thing happening and how there's floppy disks on top one another. That's happening here, but just subtly, so we just see the feature, but not like the removal of it and the changing of the material. Although maybe underneath it, I'd be curious if underneath this, like the fossil stops here because it needed this process to go through enough to like continue to the next one. So all that is there is just the beginning of the process. That would really maybe is the case. It's hard to say. It looks like it might be actually, but hard to say. This one, like the way this is around the whole ammonite, like it's all the way out here influencing, and it just happens to be like at this like hilltop on the side of this stone, and then this stone itself has little like sections that it seems to just be breaking naturally into, as if currents were like at some point flowing along certain pathways. Like this one, like that's not really an ammonite, but it's the same process. That looks much more like a current that was just flowing around a mound, pretty much, circling around it, but not enough to, and maybe even getting into the top of it, circling around it and flowing atop it, and starting to carve like an interior opening while like a donut type shape occurs, which then is just the beginning of how an ammonite occurs, probably something of that nature, with how the current just is behaving relative to the stone. Then again, we kind of see like little features here, features. All these stones have features that are ammonite-like or shallogram-like in nature that show that they are the same process producing both of them. Just one is more defined than the other, and it's really that simple. This one's incredible. Wow. Pretty bad picture that I took there because it's way better, and that's why I started recording. I was like, I should just be talking atop this like this. Ammonite at the center is this 3-barred other fossil. Even like appropriately angled, like it's not angled like counter to where, like, if this ammonite had a bar, like, I think I have a picture of this one that I'm thinking of. I certainly have it. I might have passed it already. It must be further down. There it is. Yep, I went immediately by it. Bar. Bar. Hexagon type shape here. Okay, let's watch the video though, because there's way more nuance. We got it at 20.25%, 0.25 playback speed. Here's a little hexagon within it. Notable. Boundary of some sort. Maybe? Or just... That looks like that flowed across, like it fractured through after. It's kind of like Mount Grenard. Boundary out here then. So these, my interpretation, are all currents, as I've been talking about in depth. Like these. Caused by currents. I was thinking that maybe, I wonder if these have any like nodes off of them. I haven't noticed any. That reminds me before I forget. Then there's this. This is just a, I guess I didn't label it, iridescent turgite, which unfortunately I didn't. It's from geology tweets on Twitter, but I don't know the original source. But these are just considered like things that rocks can do, things that Earth can do, not fossils. Whereas this is considered a fossil because it looks more like it. It's really that simple. It looks more like it. Like in this case, it doesn't look enough like it. Here it does kind of, but when we really look at it this way, like it doesn't look like it. But in this instance of these things, it just looks like it, seemingly, but it's not. It's still, they're all caused by currents. So what I'm going to start talking about is if we can follow these paths, then we can likely find, like, for instance, this current seemingly goes to this side of this ammonite, or comes off of that side of the ammonite, going this way, like that kind of, like trying to decipher, does the whole like match a singular like way of current flow that can generally be path travel followed, to have the travel of the current followed in like distinguishable ways that are pretty like evident. Like there, it's not as evident, especially with the zoom in. It doesn't really show it that well, but like, for instance, here, at the boundary of this ammonite, we have things happening, which is kind of what a current would do at the boundary, things happening. But then even off of it, interestingly, like right here, seemingly it just turns into this, or flows very much with it, and even like has the ammonite features across the fossil. Boundary here. This is for sure a boundary. If currents are flowing, this is a boundary that was forming here, where the currents seemingly ran into it this way. Like just any current cutting across this way ran into the boundary and started to propagate more that way. Or back, I guess, in this instance. Maybe this one bent this way. And then just like a wide channel of current that's kind of got like a overall vortex. Like, like the planets following a star where they where like this isn't how this isn't how this Earth orbits, where it's just like in a circle, but it's like a moving circle and it creates like wave structures that are cool, that are way cooler because of the rotation. Real solar system orbit. Maybe not the best place to find it. Real solar system orbit. Like this thing. Like not this. Or not this. But this. Where there's like a over under over under over under, and a generally like a nucleus that's more stable relative to the things going over and under said nucleus, although maybe still also vibrating relatively, but maybe more like a spine at times depending on circumstances. So kind of that here, where like at certain times in the and it's not just like a single plant. It's not like a single one of those traveling through and inducing this, but just an overall tendency in the region to do that, where it looks like it may have that aspect going on to a degree. A boundary over here, though, that's pretty much just straight along and opposite to this one in a pretty river-like way. Although this one, interestingly, this one is made up of the fossil, where this one is made up of almost the wall of some other energy current that's just like ammonite seemingly. I want to pay attention to the corners because this whole stone is generally hexagonal. So if the corners matter, like then because there's current flows through them or like relative things going on at corners that make them the corners versus somewhere else on the stone that ended up being a corner. Like this ended up being the corner because this is how the currents flowed seemingly. So can we see that? And in this case, maybe a little bit, like it does look kind of related to the boundary between this general system and then this other like rippling wave system. This goes up here and then maybe spirals in. And as it spirals in, it begins to flatten the little disc under the pressure, maybe. Where this one is being fed over here. Or no. Up to it, and then it looks like they kind of are bending right here in this direction. And then not after this point, kind of just going that way. Maybe playing into this, just holding a boundary and flowing in here. Some kind of mass that just kind of generally the flow didn't go through in regions like this. In the same way, maybe it looks like it did so in a subtler way, maybe. Make it a little bumpy, I don't know. Shape here. It very much looks like a fish fossil. Like when a fish fossil is found, they look more like that. But here, it's clearly the same process involved in this as this. Like it's not a fish fossil within this ammonite and these other fossils that are different. this is part of the same processes. This goes down here, passes by, and then maybe goes in this way. Seemingly meeting resistance over here then. Like there would have to be some reason for it to eddy. This comes down this way then. If this spirals in here, or it's, I guess it could, it probably doesn't come out this way and go this way because there's this. This wouldn't be there. So this is more, makes it more likely that it flowed this way. And therefore flowed in here into this. And then also flow down this way. Very fish scale like. So if that's going that way and going that way, then maybe these are all going generally down this way, which actually would make kind of sense here. Like maybe there's a boundary, and past that boundary, this energy went in here and just sent like some kind of like nucleated spears or discs. Created these discs somehow. Versus creating something more that kind of structure. Like a physical current was flowing through here and a boundary formed like at the edge of a river. And then it began to actually propagate, like flood into this region from all these kinds of locations, which then led to this kind of thing. Let's see. There's that one with the bar across it. So this one, maybe general. I was thinking it went this way because it looks like they all kind of like meet resistance and go that off that way, and even begin to grow and merge into larger systems there. This one just flips over top itself and then seems to like dendritically overlay some kind of separator region. I don't know if that's a thing that's happened. This one's going this way. This one's going opposite. This one's going opposite. And then this one's going this way. If it's grids and one's rotating one way, so the next one, like, rotates the... I don't know how to do it. One goes... Like, they go opposite ways, like gears kind of thing. Like, this one going this way, being somewhat adjacent to one going in the opposite direction, being adjacent to one going and also in the other way in opposite direction again, but then adjacent to one going like opposite to this one. It's the same as the first one here. It kind of makes sense that that might be a thing that could happen to indicate also, again, some relationship of what's going on. Like if this coming in, spiraling in, Also, if this is spiraling in, maybe on the other side in this location is some interesting features like these kinds of things just like coming out. I don't know. This is pretty central to the stone, which is interesting. Also, like the hexagon has a almost systematically does this, where it has like a Mariana Trench shape that's pushing into one of the sides. Like if we look up here, we can see the base of one here that goes all the way up here. It's kind of hard to see. But it's generally, though, the hexagon here. There's a hexagon here. Might be more visible through this graph map. Like in this region. A pretty big one, it seems. That's goes down here. Centered on this. But then it has this, like, inlet region that goes inward more. Same thing happens here, where there is the oceanic crust is pretty much like a hexagon with one side with this like thing going on, protruding inward. It's not quite the same because this current is just flowing in and pushing a boundary, and it's not. This looks much more like the current is just flowing this way, but it may be that this boundary is pushed by a current that just went this way, and then the current flows along the boundary, like the boundary pushes this current. The current flowing this way pushes the current flowing this way to have a boundary over here that creates a boundary in the hexagon systematically at like a way of this nature. And then tends to put like a nucleus at the core region, thereabouts. That is the largest ammonite in this stone, interestingly. Like, it's not this ammonite near the center, it's this one, which is reminiscent of the. Not that. Not that. Where is it? It's gotta just be here. No. Here. This one, where there's a big ol' ammonite at the center of this, like, generally hexagonal structure. So he flips it this way, so it should be generally around here when he flips it. To be the opposite location, like down here. Like here. I immediately see this circle. One second. Okay. This circle, though, like that's almost like an outer ring of an ammonite that didn't do an ammonite thing, but generally swirled. Like maybe related to this, a flow that went in this direction, like from here, and then generally here, and then went this way and swirled around, creating a swirl, but just didn't produce like a distinct ammonite. And then even continue to flow across, all the way across, maybe even from corner to corner, generally speaking. Is this... This is not where that side was. This is that side that was kind of indented. This made me think of an inlet, the way they kind of bend. Like a... Or an outlet, I guess. Either or. Like a water coming out to us and spreading, or like not being able to get in, so accumulating at a point, but then flowing in through a channel. That's like either or. It could be either. But then cuts across. Interestingly, this current and this current, if it's currents, this current produces a boundary this way, and this one produces a boundary this way, which would make sense for why then there would be an eddy forming here between and below, like inside of these ones in this region here specifically. And even this one cuts across and feeds into like its heart, interestingly, which happens here. Mount Gurnar has that kind of thing going on, where it's got like cutting across and feeding to its heart, these structures. Or just like providing a channel outlet. I think feeding, though, and in Gurnar's case, feeding at the time at least. Now it is an outlet, but currents go this way. They come in relatively laminarly, but they run into resistance and they become turbulent. Like right past this boundary here that they go through, like generally a resistance. They pass through this resistance that was here, go through, and in so doing, they enter this region where they interact with other currents, and turbulence is exactly present there. Versus here. This one bends back. Like these are coming this way and going up, this way going up, and there. Spiraling a bit, maybe underneath that, unclear. Looks like they might be on the same level as this one. Oh no. I think we're like the same spot. It's hard to say anything specific without larger components of the rock when it's these types of structures. Like here, we can at least be like, okay, here's a corner. Notice how it's kind of just similar looking throughout, just like what's going on here. We see much more like polished, like more flow was present, so it made it more like here, where just more flow went through, and here like mounds of material accumulated and prevented flow. Same kind of thing where just more flow was generally present overall, and it even like smoothed out and made it more like one unit. Seemingly. Just right along a boundary, making a boundary even. Wow. So hard to tell what's happening. It's like a mound. Definitely is an inlet where it just like current flowed. Or an outlet, I guess. Or I would say inlet. I feel like inlet would carve more and make it more like the first one, and that one would be more like an outlet where like mounds accumulate. So maybe that one was more like an outlet. Okay, so that's what I got for now. I'll see y'all soon. Peace out.